Here's what you're missing over at patreon.com/Addressing Gettysburg.
You're listening to Addressing Gettysburg.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Addressing Gettysburg. Today, we are talking with a gentleman named Dan Casella. You might have heard of his podcast, which I forgot to write down. And so, Dan, tell me, No Pollution of Cowardice,
No
South
Pollution
Jersey.
of Cowardice, South Jersey, and the Civil War.
Thank you very much. If not, you might have read one of his articles in the Civil War Times, right?
Yes.
And that article was called How an Obscure Photograph Triggered a Search for the Fate of 5 Union Soldiers. And today we're talking about the 12th New Jersey, but we're going to start off with New Jersey in general at Gettysburg. Being a native of New Jersey, let's see, this is the 4th year since I started doing Addressing Gettysburg, and we've never talked about New Jersey before. Partly because I've spent my whole life trying to get out of New Jersey, so I needed a little time to take a mental break from it, but also didn't really know anybody who could speak with any authority on the matter until Dan came along. And so we have Dan here. But Eric met you back in July.
Yeah, when we did
right?
when the Liberty Rifles did the first Minnesota program. Mm-hmm.
So that just goes to show, ladies and gentlemen, especially if you've been one of the people who we've spoken with about coming on the show and you're like, oh, they never got back to me. It's like, well, it takes time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's a pipeline, and once we meet you, you kind of go in the back of the pipeline, and we keep going until we get to you, and it's nothing personal. It's just how it works. Anyway, Dan, welcome. It's great to finally have you.
And a proper Alderston Broderston to you.
Oh, yes, Alderston Broderston to you as well, my friend. Yeah. I've been Alderston Broderston like 3 times in the last week. It was
Really?
Twice was Saturday at the visitor center. I was in the bookstore, and a little old lady came up behind me, and she goes, I think I know who this is, Alderson Broderston. And
it's fun to be recognized.
Yeah, it is fun to be recognized. And then later out in the hallway, earlier in the hallway when I first came in the door, you stop at the security checkpoint and you walk past there, and I barely got to the ranger desk, and I heard somebody just sitting over on the bench to the left go, Alderson Broderston. And I turn around and I go, Alderson Broderston to you, and I just keep on going. It's nice. It's like a little cult almost.
Yeah. Oh, no, a cult.
Yeah, no, we don't want cults, do we?
Alderson Broderston.
So we are talking about New Jersey at the Battle of Gettysburg. So before we get to the 12th, though, I'm sorry, we're talking about the 12th. Before we get to them, though, let's talk about New Jersey in general. Okay. How many regiments-ish were here?
Okay, so the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and the 15th are a part of the 1st New Jersey Brigade.
Okay.
They're in the 6th Corps, and they're going to be...
Come close to that mic, sorry.
They're going to be behind Little Round Top. The 1st, 2nd, and 3rd will exchange between... skirmish duty. Their casualties will be minimal. I don't even think they break double digits, all from stray artillery rounds. The 4th New Jersey will be on the Granite Schoolhouse Road doing provost duty for the 6th Corps.
Their monument's right on the corner there, right? Blacksmith shop and Granite Schoolhouse. Yep. Okay.
And then the brigade has that massive monument sort of between Little Round Top and the wheat field. And then you have the 2nd New Jersey Brigade, who will be George Burling's brigade, which we know is cannibalized or broken apart. And I like to call them the MVP of Sickles' line because they're all in the right place at the right time. You've got the 5th New Jersey on the Emmitsburg Road. You've got the 6th New Jersey down in Devil's Den. The 7th New Jersey on the outside of the peach orchard.
Right.
And then the 8th New Jersey helps kick off the wheat field. I don't know if you really want to call that like a sign of distinction to kick off the battle of the wheat field because it was so terrible.
Yeah.
And then you have the 11th New Jersey, which will be in the Emmitsburg Road. And then there's a rumor that they killed or they struck down William Barksdale, but that's not true. They shoot another officer who was riding a horse wearing a fez that I think he took off of the 114th PA. So they shoot that guy down, and they think it's Barksdale, but it turns out to not be.
Okay. Do we know who it was?
No, I don't. I've never been able to get to the bottom of that.
Okay.
Because I think Barksdale goes down by the Trossel farm. Right, he's hitting the foot, and his foot's dangling, and then he gets all shot up.
Down in that little thicket there after the Trossel farm, before you get to like the PA monument, somewhere around there.
Yeah. And then you have the 12th New Jersey, the Buck and Ball Regiment. They're in Alexander Hayes' division. They will have just seen their first action at Chancellorsville, and they'll lose all of their baggage because being a green and Green Regiment, not really knowing better, they drop their baggage and their knapsacks. They go into the fight and they come back and it's all gone. So they had to wait from Chancellorsville till the next quarterly issue, which I think was in August. So they had to go like almost 2.5 months without anything more than their haversacks and maybe a gun blanket.
Really?
Yeah.
That sounds uncomfortable.
Yeah, sounds terrible.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the 13th New Jersey will be in the 6th Corps. They'll be on Carmen Avenue, or their monuments on Carmen Avenue. Yeah, the 13th will be there. They're going to do some light skirmish duty. They're going to be on the flank of the 27th Indiana, who go out and get chopped up right there at Spangler Spring, and they're going to basically not sit out the fight, but they're going to sit back and do some skirmish duties. The 9th and the 14th are in. I'm sorry, the 10th, the 9th, the 10th, and the 14th are in the Union Army, but they're not at Gettysburg.
Right.
The 9th is down in North Carolina. The 10th is in Suffolk, Virginia, and the 14th, I think, is still in Maryland, because they're called the Monocacy Regiment, so they're still in that area, I think, doing guard duty as they would. But yeah, the New Jersey at Gettysburg really does its duty here.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you don't really hear a lot about New Jersey at Gettysburg.
Because there's only a few of them here.
Only a few of them, but they do, especially Burling's brigade, they do fight hard.
Yeah.
They don't fight together as a brigade, though. His brigade is cannibalized, basically, and they're sent all over the place as whole pluggers or something.
Yeah, basically.
But they do their work here,
Yeah,
and I guess for the listeners, I just thought of this is as we're talking about this, it might actually help if you have your Leno book or Gottfried's map book or something. Pull it out and look at it as we're talking, because.
Yeah,
they're all over the place.
They're all over the place.
Yeah.
I think the coolest monument out of all of them is the 6th in the rocks at Devil's Den. They go into the Valley of Death to try and help stem the tide of the Confederate wave, and I think they help pull out some artillery batteries, and they get chopped up real bad and then have to fall back. Yeah, and then the 7th gets split in half by Bigelow's battery retreating out of the peach orchard. So then they move forward because they're getting popped with artillery. So Colonel Francine's trying to move them out of harm's way. And then when they do finally meet the Confederates, or as they call them, the dirty slouch hats, they fire a volley or two and pull back. And their Colonel Francine, where the monument stands, is where Colonel Francine is mortally wounded, and he'll be evacuated to Philadelphia and die a few days later.
What got you? I mean, I'm going to assume it has to do with the fact that you're from New Jersey, but there had to be something more than that got you interested in New Jersey in the Civil War.
It would come later. I started reenacting when I was in 7th or 8th grade. Mr. Samus told my social studies teacher, shout out to him if he's ever a listener. He got me hooked on the Civil War. He told me to go to a local reenactment. I went. I joined the local unit there, and then it didn't really kick into hyper focus on New Jersey until COVID. I had the time to do it. Being a Civil War nerd, but working in the kitchen industry or the restaurant industry, I had very little time to even look up or do things about the Civil War. Maybe once a year I'd get out to do a reenactment. And then once COVID hit, I had all this free time. And I started by going to the cemetery that I can see the church steeple from my front porch. So I walked over there and started walking around, and there was 24 of those green stars,
Yeah.
So I started looking at guys. One guy lost a leg at Fredericksburg, and then there's a couple more guys that were scattered about, all with unit designations. And then I found a guy who was killed at Williamsburg. The first real fight of the Army of the Potomac on the Peninsula Campaign. And then from there, I found a photograph, and that's sort of where the article, the beginnings of the article that I wrote for the Civil War Times kicks off. Just doing the deep dive in that, and then getting involved in my local historical society. By chance, I found a handwritten letter, and a bunch of newspaper article correspondences of these guys in this photograph. And then digging even deeper into that, I found a correspondence with one of the guys and his brother who's serving in an Illinois regiment out west. He's going to be in the 17th Illinois. He's going to fight at Shiloh. He's going to fight at Fort Donelson. He'll be at Vicksburg, and then he musters out after Vicksburg. But anyway, the hyper-focus on New Jersey was the time available by COVID to go out and do these things and just go to all the local cemeteries, and again, look for those little green stars next to the headstones, and just deep dive into that. Look them up on Find a Grave, see if I can find them on Google, and it just opened the doors. And then and then changing careers after COVID. I now lay headstones for a monument company.
Oh, okay.
So I go to all sorts of cemeteries and I find all sorts of guys all the time. I mean, I found a guy from the Iron Brigade buried out in New Jersey, and it says right on his headstone, member of Iron Brigade.
Oh, neat.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Did you hear that Jeff Daniels just discovered that his ancestor fought in the Iron Brigade and was captured?
I think that's really cool.
Yeah. So okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to derail you.
I think that's
okay.
Really legit. Yeah.
So you get you get going with all this stuff, and then do you have a favorite regiment that was here? A Jersey
12th,
regiment.
The 12th New Jersey. The 12th New Jersey was the unit that I reenacted with.
Okay.
And just fallen in love with that and their story, and then once I had the time, once COVID hit, I had the time to really research all the other units. I found guys in the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th New Jersey. I found two brothers who are from a town over from me but are enlisted in the 109th Pennsylvania,
okay.
One of which is killed here at Gettysburg, and then the other one is with the regiment all the way to the when they go into like Tennessee and Georgia. He wins a Medal of Honor at the Battle of Wauhatchie Creek.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and it's kind of interesting when you get on the level of researching individuals and finding where their service took them, not always with the same regiment and not even with the same state sometimes.
Yeah. The guy who his brother goes off to Illinois and then serves in an Illinois regiment. I think he left home to go to Illinois for a girl, which that's why everybody moves,
sure,
right?
But haven't we all?
Yes. So he serves in the 17th, and I've got maybe 6 articles from him talking about his service, talking about what he's doing, and then there's a correspondence between him and the brother who I think is an older brother who fights at Williamsburg and writes about his actions afterwards. The 7th, he's in the 7th New Jersey. The 7th will drop their packs at Williamsburg and get all their stuff chopped up by Confederates. They come back and see that all the knapsacks are gone through, and then the knapsacks themselves are destroyed. So these guys go from Williamsburg, May 5th, 1862, until they get resupplied in Washington, right before Second Manassas. So these guys, if anybody knows, what's his name? 5th New Jersey book. I can't remember it.
I don't know. The 5th New Jersey book?
There's a guy who had his diaries found in an attic, and then somebody turned it all into a book. Gone for a Soldier. Alfred Bellard.
Okay. Never heard of him.
That's all right. It's a great book. The guy writes so much. He draws a bunch of things, and they're all they're elementary sketchings, but they're very detailed.
Okay.
And he writes about how when he was going into the Battle of Williamsburg, one of his shoes had fallen apart, so he had a boot that was a different size than his other shoe. So he's like waddling along, and then his feet hurt, so he jumps out of the ranks and doesn't participate in the fight. But just things like that that really that I really get a kick out of. Rather than listening or reading about another general. I mean,
right.
Okay, so Kent Masterson Brown put out the book about General Meade. It's a great book, but how many books have been written about Lee, Meade, Lincoln? Those are great, but I love to hear about the nitty-gritty, the things that the soldiers experience.
Yeah, that's and that seems to be a generational thing for sure, because I think under a certain age, you're more interested, or you're more inclined to be interested in the human interest side of things. And I guess, how old are you?
34.
34. Okay, so you're 10 years younger than me, and I think like my age group, we're kind of on the cusp of both. Like we grew up in a very weird time. We remember what it's like to actually write by hand.
Yep.
We remember what it's like to read a book that's actually a book.
Yep. Having to go to a library.
Right. We remember what it's like to wait until you get home to see who called you. Mm-hmm. We remember call waiting. We remember busy signals. We remember all these things.
Yeah.
We remember not being able to get a hold of someone when you want to get a hold of them.
Yeah.
But we also were at the beginning of the internet. We were young enough at the beginning of the internet to learn how it works.
Yeah.
And to help build it and all those other things. And so, and it's the same thing I think with history is we come from an era of learning from older generations who focused on tactics and generals.
Yeah.
And so that's like our default position.
Yep.
But because of you guys, younger people who are interested more in the human interest stuff, and as we get to know you guys and what you're putting out there and what you're sharing, that makes us go, oh, that's kind of interesting. And then now all of a sudden we're kind of interested in that. Because I was never really interested in that type of stuff.
The individual story.
Yeah, too many
Yeah.
to keep up with.
Right, there
Yeah.
are, but at the same time, I feel like that's where you get the best quality content from, is from these guys.
Listen to the rest of this interview and dozens like it. Support the show and get early access to special episodes, early and discounted ticket sales, and more. The second lieutenant level and above gets access to all monthly Patreon episodes. So please go to patreon.com/addressinggettysburg, choose a tier, and join. And I thank you in advance.